Oh, why hello again! It feels like it's been an age since last we met. Rarity of Carousel Boutique at your service, business pony and dressmaker extraordinaire. Oh, and holder of the element of generosity. It's been a little over a week now since the ordeal with that brute of a chaos spirit. Everyone else seems to be keeping it together all right. It seems Scootaloo's been hanging around Rainbow Dash more often, and I hear that dear Fluttershy has asked Miss Cheerily for advice on handling difficult fillies. Perhaps she wants to give babysitting one more shot. As for myself, I am doing perfectly fine, thank you. I can now look at jewelry without feeling nauseous. I can now look at the rocks outside without falling into fits of self-loathing. I only break into a cold sweat when touching diamonds rather than all gems. And the nightmares where a handsome prince comes to woo me, only to tell me his name is Tom and transform into a giant boulder, now only happen every other night. Yes, I'd say I've perfectly recovered from that terrible ordeal without the slightest strain on my inner beauty. Now, if only Pinkie Pie would stop asking why none of my dresses have gems on them anymore. Or Twilight would stop asking why I've been giving Spike so many gems when he visits. And I wish Fluttershy would stop telling me that I need to open up and talk more about what happened. What am I supposed to say? That all Discord had to do was offer me something shiny and I fell right for it? Maybe I should take a page out of Liarjack's book and say I resisted his temptations flawlessly like doing with Fluttershy, and he had to force me to be selfish. Though I think we've all had our share of lies for one lifetime. If I may be honest, for the first time since I was chosen by the element of generosity, I've been asking myself if I really am worthy. Oh, I've dealt with my fair share of hecklers and fools who try to paint me as some greedy nag who trade her friends in for a pretty bauble and a heartbeat. Even now I refuse to dignify their verbal assault with an answer. But now I found myself wondering, was I truly being generous for the sake of others? Or simply because I couldn't stand to look at anything that didn't fit my idea of beauty, and I was compelled to change it to my ideal image? Am I just like Discord? I alone know the way the world should and shouldn't be, and everything that conflicts with that must change, no matter what. But then, is that not how it is with every pony? Pinkie Pie thinks ponies should always be happy, and certainly seems to go out of her way to make it so. Fluttershy wants everyone to be kind, but she knows better than to force it onto ponies because it would be cruel. Oh, blast it all, blast it all! May Celestia take it all and banish it to the moon! Was I really so desperate for love that I fell for a giant rock? I could swoon any stallion I wanted. Why don't I just find one worthy of my time and finally have my prince? Why did Blue Blood really ruin my foalhood dreams so thoroughly that the only one I could stand to be with was an object that couldn't possibly mistreat me? Did I let the arrogant Ponce get to me that much? Even after I lost my temper and gave him the stern talking to he so richly deserved, am I really still letting that upper-class snob affect me? Yes, I know Spike would move mountains for me if I asked. It's cute, if a little awkward. I'll admit, it was a little painful realizing even he wouldn't come to my side when I was brainwashed, though with how I was acting, I can't say I blame him. At least he didn't hear me call him Twilight's little minion. I'm thankful that Sweetie Belle didn't have to see me like that. By the time we returned to Ponyville, she was as mad as the rest of town. Oh, I wish Celestia would let me take a sledgehammer to Discord's statue. Poor Sweetie even threw out her doll collection. They were giving her so many nightmares. I rescued them from the trash and stashed them away in a workroom cupboard. I know she'll thank me someday. I hope. Cheerily and the parents of all the foals in town have been trying their hardest to help their children recover. But it's difficult when we've all got our own set of traumas to sort through. Celestia, bless her, I can tell how badly Cheerily's hurting from her time as Discord's mad plaything, but still she soldiers on, insisting she wants to help her students bloom again, as is the meaning of our cutie mark. Princess Celestia had the sense to put out a royal mandate for counselors from all over Equestria to visit Ponyville and the other towns Discord affected, but there's only so many ponies with a talent for therapy, and far more who actually need the therapy, so the doctors have been focusing on those who most need the help. For instance, I've been told that Big Backindash has recovered enough to be able to stay in a room with the dog without breaking down into nervous wreck. I'll admit that I don't know Applejack's brother all that well, but seeing that mountain of strength and silent will so damaged is wrong on a whole other level. But in the past week, we've all recovered enough to at least pretend that nothing's happened, and be able to play at normalcy. Well, most of us. My loving, caring, oh so attentive parents practically fled Ponyville with photo finish on the first train to Seaward Shoals as part of their therapy for whatever torment Discord put them through. I never asked what that snake put them through, though I noticed they were covered in bruises shaped suspiciously like those tacky named brand horseshoes they always wore. So naturally, I am once again left with Sweetie Belle in my care. I swear to Celestia I spend more time raising my sister than my parents do. Back after a week's vacation, my flank. And after all this time, I still fall for it. This is far from the first time Sweetie's plagued my home for over a month, and I'm sure it won't be the last. I love her dearly, of course, but the added stress is certainly not helping. Spike's been visiting every day, asking if there's anything he can do for me. I give him some meaningless task or another until he's satisfied and send him off with a gem or two. I can't bear the idea of using him for actual labor. And anyway, I haven't been particularly busy lately. With most ponies around here still focus on healing, almost all my orders have been from out of town. Perhaps I should just turn him down gently, point out that he's far too young for me, and by the time he reaches adulthood, I'll be in a rocking chair. But he's just about the only one in Ponyville who isn't suffering from Discord's games, and I won't be the one to break that innocence. Somehow, in their madness, a few ponies managed to write up semi-coherent orders for dozens of eyesores my friends called dresses. I threw them out as soon as I found them, far be it from me to force them to honor anything they did or said while under Discord's influence. Thank the princesses that Applejack, along with the others, volunteered to take Tom, the boulder, far away and drop him off Ghastly Gorge, so I would never have to lay eyes upon it ever again. May the damnable rock be shattered into a million pieces. Twilight at first had calmly suggested that I should keep it as a reminder of hardships endured, and let my experiences make me a better pony. I calmly suggested in return that Twilight go to Tartarus. She didn't begrudge me the reaction. With it gone, I could finally walk around the shop without thinking every large shadow I saw was it following me around somewhere. At least those nightmares have stopped. There's a clattering behind me, and I turn to see the door to my workroom shattered into pieces. Tom rolls in, a bouquet of flowers sticking out of its cracks. No! No! I trot backward. It rolls closer. Go away! I love you more than anything, Rarity, my love! A voice rumbles, sounding suspiciously like blue blood. And we shall be together forever! I take another step backward and bump into something. I turn to see a cockatrice glaring at me, and before I know it, everything, my skin, my veins, grow numb with cold. I can still see, hear, think, but cannot move. I see a statue of a unicorn look out at me from one of my mirrors, and feel nothing but cold. Now, my stone princess, let us be off! Dozens of smaller rocks rolled in behind Tom and pushed me along, picking up one of my wedding dresses and rolling it onto me. I cannot move. I cannot speak. I can only stand there like a pretty little dress-up doll. My dearest Rarity, let us enjoy our happily ever after, together, forever! I startle awake and stumble backward with a yelp, falling on my flanks. I'd fallen asleep on my hooves in the middle of the day? How embarrassing. Thank goodness no one had borne witness of such a travesty. Perhaps all these restless nights are finally catching up to me. I look around my stockroom, staring at the dozens of dresses I designed, each with a dazzling array of gems I had found and dug up myself. Even my earliest designs had always included them in some way, even before I got my cutie mark. They all gleamed at me, showing the reflection of a mare aged beyond her time, exhausted, weary, weighed down by unseen phantoms. And then, for a single brief moment, I saw Discord's face sneering back at me. I screamed, using my horn to tear off the gems I had so painstakingly placed myself, demolishing hours, days, weeks of effort in mere minutes, snarling, cursing all the way. How dare they betray me? How dare they lead me astray? Jules had given me my cutie mark, had helped me realize my special talent in creating things of beauty. How dare they betray me now, turning me into something I wasn't? I tossed them every which way, shattering windows, piercing mannequins, damaging the walls. I didn't care. I showed no mercy to any of those treacherous Jules. My dresses were torn to shreds. I kept screaming. I kept snarling. Rarity? I heard a small voice like a sleigh bell. I turned and hissed. Sweetie Belle cried out in fear, looking at the ugly thing wearing her sister's face. Rarity, your dresses! What are you— I'm fixing them! You said they wouldn't work without the— I said I'm fixing them, you stupid Billy! Don't you dare talk back to your elders! A sharp circlet whizzed by Sweetie Belle's head and embedded itself in the wall behind her. A few shreds of mane fell to the floor. Sweetie Belle gasped and fell to her knees, making herself as small as possible. I heard a sniffle over the blood rushing in my ears. Reality crashed down on me. Oh, Celestia, forgive me. I was at her side in an instant. If I didn't know any better, I'd say I'd finally learned to teleport. Sweetie Belle shrank a little at my touch. I looked her over carefully. Thankfully, the circlet had missed her, if only barely, but it had been eye level, and I wasn't exactly aiming. If it had been just a couple inches to my right— I'm sorry, Sweetie Belle, I whispered. I'm so sorry. Your big sister just did a very bad thing just now. She's so sorry. You haven't done anything wrong. I'm not angry at you, I promise. I won't hurt you. I won't shout at you again. I'm just upset. I'm ashamed I could ever consider a simple jewel to be the most beautiful thing in the world, that I could ever think them my most precious treasure. I promise. I'm not angry with you. Sweetie Belle finally stopped shaking and glanced up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What is your most precious treasure? I nuzzled her. You are, Sweetie Belle. You are the most wonderful and beautiful thing in the world to me, because you aren't a thing. You're my baby sister. There's only one of you. That makes you more precious than 1,000 diamonds, and more special than 1,000,000 jewels. Jewels can't tell me how much they love me, and they can't listen when I tell them how much I love them. You, Sweetie Belle, are the most important thing to me. We lay there on the floor together for a long while, enjoying each other's company and watching the sunset through the broken window till I finally put a cloth over it to keep the night chill out. No offense, Princess Luna, but I'd rather not have Sweetie catching any colds. Come on now, let's get this place cleaned up and go to bed. I promise you can help. I can? Sweetie asked, cautious but eager. She's never not jumped at the chance to help her big sister, no matter how big or small the task. You can't buy that kind of devotion. Yes, dear. You are, after all, my most beautiful and wonderful treasure. A few days, a lot of cleanup, a rather eventful nightmare night, and a lovely spa trip between sisters later, I was in the shop again as normal. For a tiny bit, it felt like the precious status quo we all lived for was restored to how it should be. Then there was a jingle at the door. A little pink filly with a purple and white mane trotted through the front door. She moved with the snotty air of an upper-class heiress, though her motions reminded me of a doll, forced, almost mechanical, as though she was putting conscious thoughts into every step. My eyes landed on the crown on her head, and my coat became matted with sweat as her name flashed through her mind. Greetings, Miss Verity. Like her body language, her voice was prim and proper with a healthy sprinkling of childish arrogance, but it too seemed forced. I was considered part of Ponyville's upper crust, for all that's meant in this little town, but some, like the Tiaras, considered me an outsider due to my being a unicorn. Even so, the filly went through the motions of politeness with minimal snobbery. Welcome to the Carousel Boutique, young miss. What can I help you with today? I said, my professional business tone just a hint more forced than usual. The filly took a step closer. I took one back. The filly either didn't notice or pretended not to. She spoke with a sense of entitlement that all fillies of her station hold. Your little store has the honor of accepting a very important commission from me, Miss Verity. I expect it to be completed before the week is out. I expect this won't be a problem for a store with so little business as yours. I kept my customer service smile on, just barely. Ignorant fool, I likely do more work in a week than your parents do in a year. May I see the design you wish me to complete? As she reached into her saddlebags, I noted how odd it was that a spoiled filly like herself had no escort, or at least a friend. Didn't Sweetie Belle say she was rarely without that silver filly? The filly pulled out a crudely drawn figure of a dress with measurements in adult hoofredding. The dress appeared to be fitted for an adult mare, and it was exactly as gaudy as you'd expect from a child. Little sense of style, far more flair than substance. This. I trust you'll be able to follow the design with no real problems. Ignore what the notes say, include at least 5 times as many diamonds as that, and make sure they're the largest you have. I know you're supposed to be an expert on finding diamonds or whatever, so no excuses. She practically shoved the design in my face, and I saw them. Diamonds scattered all over the over-designed nightmare of a dress, with a big one drawn to the side as if for example. The filly continued to ramble, but I wasn't listening anymore. All I heard was that brute's voice taunting me. All I saw was my own hooves tearing a stone wall apart, desperate for the shiny gems within. All I remembered was the horrible way I treated my friends, convinced they were out to steal from me, and the horrible, aching shame when I was finally brought to my senses. I'd been no better than the spoiled brat in front of me. Yes, I'd been deluded into thinking that rock was a treasure, but how much of the rest was really me? I felt a pressure behind my eyes as Vera agreed. No, my actions ran through my head. I had been so wretched. Are you even listening, you narwhal? Shouted that filly. Diamond Tiara. Get out. What? Diamond Tiara gasped. When was the last time an adult had told her no? I said no, I growled. You can take your business elsewhere. Now get out, and don't you dare come near my store again! You can't... I don't let her finish. I lifted the very angry, then confused, then scared filly in my magic, reveling in her fear. Now listen here, you selfish little fool. If I ever catch you saying that horrible word to me or my sister ever again, I'll tell your teacher, and I promise you will listen to me. And if I find you near my home again, I'll see you sent to the dungeons for trespassing. And I assure you, whatever little revenge fantasy you've got cooking in the empty head of yours won't work. My customers will never listen to anything you or your parents say. My parents, Diamond Tiara began to snarl before I telekinetically tossed her out the door. Her namesake fell to the floor, and I practically threw it at her, watching in satisfaction as the spoiled brat picked it up with her teeth and fled. The adrenaline spent, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. My actions echoed through my mind over and over again, till Sweetie Belle came home from her latest Crusaders adventure. No need for bandages or a bath this time, so that Scootaloo mustn't have picked out the activity today. Rarity? Sweetie asked, looking at me with concern. I must have looked more ragged than usual for these past few weeks. Are you okay? It's nothing, dear. A classmate of yours simply came by to request a commission, but I had to turn it down. Diamond Tiara? Sweetie Belle asked. She flinched at the instinctive glare I shot her for saying that word. Yes, darling, if you must know. Don't worry, she didn't cause any trouble. Was she acting weird like at school? I froze. Carefully, I asked, what do you mean, acting weird? Well, Sweetbell looked uncomfortable under my gaze. She doesn't really bully us anymore. She's become a lot quieter. I blinked away the feeling of self-revulsion rising in my throat. Really? Well, she doesn't really look at us anymore, or anyone. Miss Shirley has to keep asking her to pay attention in class. Well, she always had to do it, but before it was because Tiara kept whispering to Silver Spoon during lessons. Now it's like, I guess she's somewhere else. Would you say she's being nicer? Not really. She just ignores us instead of taunting us, but she's been yelling at Silver Spoon a lot lately. My jaw dropped. What? But isn't that her only real friend? Yeah, Apple Bloom thought it was weird too. Ever since school started again, every time Silver Spoon tries to talk to her, Tiara just yells at her. She called her a good-for-nothing four eyes, said her teamwork is stupid, says it means her only talent is being rich, and that she's worthless. Her ears pinned back in that expression I recognized as pity for the enemy, and the confusion that followed. Miss Shirley gave Tiara a timeout, and Silver Spoon got sent to the counselor after that. I think she was crying. Later, I overheard Miss Shirley trying to talk to Tiara, and Tiara shouted that she wished you hadn't met in Discord and that everyone in Ponyville was still crazy. I didn't see her for a week after that. I just listen. It's all I can do. There's clearly a bigger picture going on there, one that I hadn't bothered to look for. I let my eyes lower to the floor in thought, then noticed a scrap of paper on the floor. I lifted it with my horn and realized it was that filly's sketch. With it not being shoved in my face, I could finally read the caption on the bottom. For Mother. Mother? Sweetiebelle read over my shoulder. I didn't think she had a mom. Eh? I thought I'd already had the talk about where fools come from. I mean, I know she had one at some point, but when Miss Shirley wants to talk to our parents, it's only ever her dad who shows up. She always talks about how great her dad is, but nothing about her mom, so we figured she didn't have one. Everyone has a mother, Sweetiebelle. Everyone, I sighed. Everyone is some mother's child. I tucked the sketch away somewhere safe, and spent the rest of the evening with Sweetiebelle in peace. I asked about her day, and she asked bits about mine. Shirley was apparently falling back on her old tactic of relating to her students by sharing her own ordeal during Discord's games. Sweetie said she'd been attempting to plant flowers in other ponies' heads. She also told her students about the dangers of bottled feelings, and how they could cause greater harm than what caused those feelings if left bottled up. It was really weird. What was, dear? Seeing Silver Spoon cry. I didn't think she knew how to. Of course, the black and white thinking of a child, and far too many adults. Silver Spoon was bad, and therefore could not be good. There wasn't a single thing in her that made her a real pony, just a vessel for Sweetiebelle and her friend's misery. Well, you did say her only friend just said some very awful things to her. Wouldn't you cry if Apple Bloom or Scootaloo did the same to you? But they'd never say awful things to me. Didn't you tell me about that fight you had in the Canterlot Garden? I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, but that was the evil dragon snake. We'd never do that on our own. She waved off the idea of her friends ever genuinely fighting like it was unthinkable. After all, friends were never supposed to fight, right? Wasn't that the point of being a friend? I sighed. I had far more experience dealing with children than poor Fluttershy, but that by no means made it easy. If you're sure it was, then I'm sure too. Now eat your alfalfa. I kept Tiara's sketch in my workroom. That's where I could easily grab it if she ever returned for it. She never did. I wondered what deadly wrath she was convincing her dear father to bring down upon me for my heinous crimes. I doubt she realized that my position as friends with Her Majesty's personal student and two-time hero of Equestria gave me no small amount of leverage. Her father was likely wiser than to attempt to cross me no matter how his daughter begged, but still I was sure to watch my flank for the next few days. With curiosity nagging at me, I paid a few visits to the town records, then milked the gossip sources, filtering out fact from fiction with well-practiced ease. Taking advantage of the princess's decree, I even paid a few visits to some of the psychologists in town, though none of them would answer my questions. All the same, though, in a few days I had all the information I needed. I closed the shop early that day and began to work. I told Sweetiebelle she should consider doing something nice for Silver Spoon. She looked at me like I had told her to give flowers to Nightmare Moon. Well aware of how much I was sounding like Fluttershy, I crashed down and told her, Sweetiebelle, being generous to ponies you like is easy. Being generous to strangers is simple. Being generous to ponies you dislike is neither, and that makes it all the more worthwhile. But why would you want someone awful to get a gift? I thought about how best to explain this. Sweetie, I won't pretend I think there's any good in Discord. I didn't think there was any good in Nightmare Moon either, and all it took was us curing her to turn her back into Princess Luna. And if there can be good in someone like Nightmare Moon, what about anyone else? Sweetbelle's face screwed up in an admirable struggle to understand where I was coming from. But what does that have to do with giving a gift to a bad guy? Why give a bad guy something when you could give it to a good pony instead? It's not that simple, Sweetie Belle. Nightmare Moon thought everyone was the bad guy for not appreciating her night, but we proved her wrong and pulled her out of the dark place she'd made for herself. I hope I've taught you that what others think does matter, though I know your teacher will say otherwise. If some pony's awful to you, it's because they believe they have a right to be, either because you're less of a pony in their eyes or because you've done something to deserve it somehow. I sighed. I'm sorry, Sweetie Belle. I really don't expect you to get any of this. But please, listen to your big sister. Being generous to someone who doesn't like you, and who you don't like, is the most generous thing one can do. Sweetie Belle just nodded unconvincingly and wandered off, my words still churning in her head. Hopefully her admiration of me would help the words sink in just enough to make the right choice. I turned back to my work and didn't stop until all was dark. I may have had to swallow my pride just a little and ask Fluttershy for help on the sewing. How a mayor who specialized in animal care knew more about sewing than I will never understand. When I wasn't sewing, I was out in the fields, hunting for gems. The diamond dogs knew well enough to steer clear of me, but I, persuaded them to assist me in my search. It was like swallowing bitter tea every time I was given one of my bounty, but I endured. I let the sweat pool on my brow, let my body shiver until it was sore, and I endured. The dogs were quite surprised when, at the end of their labors, I presented them with an equivalent amount of other gems from my collection to what they had gathered for me. I had to explain to them, slowly, that this is what us ponies called fair trade. I'll admit, I had originally planned on simply using their fear of me to get what I wanted and going home. But then I remembered my conversation with Sweetie Belle about how wrong it is to reduce some pony, or some dog as it were, to the harm they had caused, and I realized I'd done the same to my kidnappers. As much as I loathe them, I can appreciate their fascination with jewels, simple though it may be. When I got home, I arranged the treasures by size and weight. The constant exposure wasn't pleasant, but I was able to build up the tolerance needed to work again. Perhaps I was being selfish again. Perhaps I was using this as the excuse I needed to give myself the exposure therapy needed to be able to work again. But whatever the true motivation, it had to be done. I found I simply could not ignore it. Sweetie told me that evening that she and the others had tried to approach Silverspoon, only to be yelled at. Silver had asked if they had come to laugh at her now that Diamond Tiara hated her too. Brought to mind a cornered animal. Shirley had stepped in to break them apart, leaving the Crusaders quite confused. They are simply too young to understand that Ability's greatest fear is being bullied themselves. She later mentioned that Silverspoon and Diamond Tiara had been moved to opposite ends of the classroom. Silverspoon had always been a follower, not a leader, and now she found herself alone. Of course she'd think that the fillies she'd taunted were just trying to trick her into vulnerability now that the protection of a leader was gone. I told Sweetie Belle not to give up, that maybe Silverspoon simply didn't understand what it meant to truly be friends with some pony. She thought I was crazy. Perhaps I am. Perhaps everyone in Ponyville is, after that day. 2 days later, having barely made my incredibly real deadline, I trotted up to the rich household. I knocked on the door and was greeted by a lavender stallion. I informed him that I had a personal delivery for the young lady of the household. Diamond Tiara trotted down the stairs, no doubt wondering what could be so important as to interrupt her precious time. I knew the instant she saw me by the way her face contorted in rage. "You!" she glared at the poor butler. "Throw her out!" The old stallion looked ready to try, despite his age. I plastered a smile on my face and said, "I brought you your permission, Miss Tiara." "Huh?" She blinked at me in confusion. Her butler glanced between us, hesitant. "Free of charge, and with free delivery to you personally. On one condition." "Condition?" She sounded not the slightest bit amused. I know I wasn't the nice already, but I knew it needed to be done. I lifted the case off my back with my magic and opened it to show her the contents within. A freshly made dress, 2 compartments full of diamonds, and a spool of thread. "You dare! You want to show your mother you still love her? You want to show her you haven't given up on her, that you still believe in her, that she's still your mother, no matter what your father says to the contrary? The best gifts, my dear, aren't the most expensive ones. They're the ones you put the most time into yourself, the ones you've put the most effort into. They're the ones that show you really care about the person you're giving the gifts to." Diamond Tiara's jaw hung wide open. I gave her the formal, proper farewell expected of a member of high society, and made my exit. Behind me I heard heavy hoofsteps and a quick shuffling noise. A glance through the window revealed a brown stallion passing by a minute later, and the case hastily hidden behind the butler. I managed a smile. Perhaps I was being foolish, but I didn't think this was pointless. If nothing else, it helped me to finally understand. Making things beautiful and making beautiful things is simply what I'm good at. A pony is not a slave to their cutie mark, no matter what society may teach you. It's your guide, not your master. My elements and my cutie mark are not the same thing. They never have been, and I've been a fool for believing they were. If spreading beauty is what I'm good at, and being generous to others is what my element represents, then of course I'll share my talent with the world. But that isn't the only thing I can share. Letting my sister help me, spending time with others, giving advice to fillies in need, These are generosities too, not just giving away material trinkets. And I really should have remembered that when Twilight's spell reminded me of all the times I had been true to that promise. I was simply too scared of myself to realize. I suppose I'll never know how much of what I did was Discord's curse, and how much was my own choice. But I'm not ashamed anymore. Not as long as I remember that no matter what riches may cross my path, the greatest treasure lies at home, patiently awaiting my return. And whether I find someone with which to live my life is up to me. As I walk back towards Carousel Boutique, I close my eyes and take in the cool autumn breeze. For the first time in weeks, I finally feel free. Diamond Tiara trotted through the building with a bag held in her mouth, determinedly ignoring the countless puncture wounds dotting her hooves. For once she found herself envying the dexterity Unicorn's horn offered. Swimming with hooves was harder than she thought. To her left was a large burly Pegasus pony with a keycard around his neck. To her right, one of her family's servants, because there was no way in Tartarus this place would let a filly in without adult supervision. Randolph had sworn not to tell Filthy Bridge where his daughter really spent these afternoons. Diamond Tiara made the mistake of glancing into one of the other rooms only once, and quickly looked away from the dull pink mare with stomps where her wings should be. "Screwball, you got a visitor," said the burly Pegasus when at last they arrived, sliding open a small hatch on the door. Diamond Tiara reflexively snarled at the sound of that cruel nickname coming from the oversized feather duster. "Her name is Golden Tiara," she hissed. "Oh, could it be so, sang the adult mare on the other side. A pink earth pony with a purple-white striped mane glided into view of the door's window. "Whoever could it be on this most special of days?" Diamond Tiara awkwardly shoved her bag through the opening on the door. "It's me, Mama. Happy birthday." "Oh, my sweet baby. Is that you? Does Phil darling know you're here?" "Of course he does," she lied. "He's hoping very much that you'll get better." The mare behind the door opened the bag and pulled out the dress with a flourish, happily trying it on every which way except the way it was meant to be worn. "Oh, is this from me? Oh, it's so pretty. Did you make this, dear? It's so wonderful. Come, dear, let me hug you." Diamond Tiara didn't hesitate. She pressed herself against the door desperately, sticking one hoof through the gap. She felt a sting in her eyes when her mother's hoof met hers. "You know, dear, the world was finally red again a few days ago. Everything stopped being confusing, and everything made sense again. The doctors even started making sense, and let me and everyone else out to play. Then that rainbow came, the world was confusing again. Don't worry, I'm sure the world will make sense again very soon. If only it could all make sense again, just once. Then Mommy will be back home with you and Phil, darling. I bet it'll be in time for your birthday. You'd like Mama to be there, yes, dear?" "Yes, Mama. That would be very nice." The stinging turned to moisture. She needed to end this now. "I'm sorry, Mama. I have to go now. Daddy's waiting." "Okay, sweetheart. Tell Phil, darling, that his princess still loves her prince when you see him." I will, Mama. Goodbye." She fled. She couldn't bear to let her mother see her crying.